Hey there, it's SebFrey here with another exciting episode of It's a Seb Show. And today I want to talk about selling a home that is tenant occupied. So, most homes that are for sale are actually occupied by their owners, but not all of them. Not all of them. Some homes are sold with tenants in them, and it can happen, right? Let's just say you own a house in an area and you love it, and then all of a sudden you get a job transfer or something, and you say, you know what, while I'm working this job over here, I'm going to rent my house out to some tenants just for a few years, and then I'll come back, kick the tenants out, and resume my life. But what often happens is, like, after 5 or 10 years, you say, you know what, gee, I'm never going to go back to where I was living before. And I don't like being a landlord, and I have better uses for that money than in a house I'm not enjoying. I'm just going to go ahead and sell that house. Common enough thing, happens all the time. And then one big question comes up is, should I sell the house with the tenants in it, or should I have the house vacant first before I put it on the market? Now, that's a very good question, and I want to talk about that. So first things I will say is that it depends on the kind of property. If you have like a fourplex that you're selling, right? You are selling it to somebody who's probably not going to be an owner occupant. That person is probably never going to want to live there. Maybe they will. Now, in the case of a duplex, yeah, it's a very good chance that actually the owner will want to live there, or maybe not. It really depends on what kind of property it is, where it's located, etc., etc. But there are certain properties where it is likely, more than likely perhaps, that the buyer wants it to have tenants in it because they're looking at it as an income property, right? All they care about really is making money, and they want to have nice tenants, obviously, and they want to make more money over time, etc., etc. But they're happy to buy a home which is already tenant occupied because it's like a money making machine from the day they close escrow, assuming, of course, that they have a big enough down payment where it cash flows, right? Okay, so in that case, yes, it's totally fine to sell your home with tenants in it because a lot of buyers are expecting and even appreciate the fact that there are tenants in it. Now, when it comes to single family homes or condominiums or townhouses or whatever, most people who are buying those, not all, but most, intend to occupy it as their primary residence, right? So for those kind of people, I strongly advise that you not have any tenants in the property, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when you are selling a home with tenants actually in place, you have to give the tenants 24-hour notice before you come onto the property, right? That's tenants' rights, at least here in California. So you have to give them 24-hour notice before you can actually show the property. Now, a lot of buyers, they sort of want to see property on like the spur of the moment, right? They'll say, hey, I'm going to go see some houses this afternoon, right? And they won't be able to see your home if you require 24-hour notice to show it, right? So you're automatically right there going to get a lot fewer buyers coming through your home just because they need to have that 24-hour notice. So fewer buyers equals fewer showings equals fewer offers equals a lower sale price. But let's just say that their buyer is, a pretty organized person, and they say, hey, I'm going to come down there like on Thursday. Let me arrange a showing for this property. Not a problem. You have 24 hours plus notice. Very easy. Well, when you get into the property, what do you think you're going to see? Are you going to see a home that looks like it belongs in Better Homes and Gardens? No, you're not. You're not going to see a staged home. You're going to see a lived-in home. And let's just face it, the reality is that lived-in homes, for most of them, unless you have like a housekeeper that's there full time, always cleaning up behind you, it's not gonna look as great as like a vacant staged property would. It's just not going to, right? There's gonna be dirty dishes. There's gonna be socks on the bedroom floor. The bed's gonna be unmade. There's gonna be a towel, a damp towel on the bathroom floor, right? There's gonna be weird books and artwork and family photos and dog hair or who knows what else. The fact is, your house just is not going to show as well. It's not going to have that same emotional appeal as a staged property that's been primed and ready for a buyer to walk in and fall in love with it. Okay, so that's number two. And number three is that, while you can tell the tenant, hey, listen, I'm going to come in 24 hours, and the tenant can't deny you access, at the same time, you can't force the tenant to leave, right? So it could very well be that when you come to see a house, the tenant is there, right? Now, many tenants I happen to have noticed over the years, they're not exactly thrilled with the idea of the house they're living in selling to somebody else. Even if they're going to be allowed to stay, they're not usually super thrilled with the whole process and having strangers come to their house all the time, right? They don't like it. And so because they don't like it, they oftentimes have a sort of, like an attitude of like, oh, you, dear buyer, are an interloper in my house. And the buyers tend to not feel very much at home in that kind of environment. They aren't, they don't have a feeling like, oh, I want to stay here and hang out. They feel like I'm intruding. I need to get out of here as soon as possible. And that's not really a great formula for getting a buyer to feel a connection with your house. Not only that, because these tenants oftentimes are not super excited with the idea of losing their house and having to move out, they may say things which are unflattering about the house and potentially even unflattering about you, the seller. So you have to bear that in mind. I've seen that many, many times where tenants will say all kinds of things. They'll exaggerate and make a mountain out of a molehill, and they just sort of do like their sort of passive aggressive methods of like getting you to like not be as interested in the house. Now, so what I've found, and this, you're not going to see this on an appraisal report. There's no adjustment that they make for tenant versus non-tenant occupied properties. What I've seen is that homes that have tenants in them sell for about 5% less than homes which are vacant and staged, right? And staging, I'm not necessarily talking about like renting a whole bunch of furniture, but I'm talking about, refreshed, looking good, looking clean, maybe new paint, maybe new whatever, just, dressed up and made fresh and inviting, as opposed to just kind of like filled with a bunch of stuff from the tenants, right? So now obviously there's going to be some cost in staging the house, but usually it's far less than 5% of the purchase price. And then, of course, you're not going to be having some income while the tenant is out of the property, right? You might have a couple of months, maybe, of vacancy if you have the property priced right. But no matter how you slice it, you're definitely going to net considerably more money if you have your single-family home with a targeted owner-occupant buyer than if a single-family home is occupied by a tenant, right? So that's my advice to you, if at all possible. If it's a single-family home or a condo or townhouse where the buyer is going to be living there, do yourself a favor. Get the tenant out of there. You're going to have a lot better luck getting that home sold quickly and for a significantly higher price. All right, well, that is it for this episode of It's a Seb Show. I hope you have enjoyed watching it. And if you have, would you do me a favor? Would you give me a thumbs up? Would you give me a like? Would you give me a comment? And this, my mind would be blown. Would you give me a share? Would you share this with somebody that you know who is struggling with this very question, like, what do I do with my tenants before I sell the house? All right, well, that is it for this episode of It's a Seb Show. Thank you so much for watching, and I will have another episode up again before too long.